With Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice opening this Friday, we realized two things. One, the summer movie season now officially starts in March, and two, there was no way we'd be able to do this week's episode on anything other than Batman and or Superman. Because we were frightened by commitment, we went for a bit of both, focusing on the 70s and 80s Superman movies and the Batman flicks from the 80s and 90s. We've dug up some plum things on the Nolan-era movies too, and we'll get to those in another installment, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that episode. Alright, enough setup. Here are 7 things you didn't know about Superman. Or Batman. Probably. Richard Donner's Superman preceded Tim Burton's Batman by 11 years, so let's start there. Casting was just one of many challenges Superman the movie would face. The Adam West Batman series and even The Adventures of Superman from the 50s with George Reeves led a lot of people to dismiss the project from the onset, figuring it would just be camp.
Why, it is Superman. He's reversing the explosion. He's driving it back into the ground.
What helped the producers get credibility, and in turn financing, was getting Marlon Brando to sign on. But Brando didn't come cheap. He got an unprecedented payday for playing Jor-El, $3.7 million, and for just 2 weeks of work. It's a ton of money by today's standards, so you can imagine what people must have thought of that number in the late 70s. And it gets even better.
I bequeath you, my son.
You may notice Brando looking down in these shots. Well, that's because he's reading his lines. They had cue cards and cheat sheets stashed all over the set because Brando didn't believe in memorizing lines. He felt he got more honest and spontaneous performances by reading them right there in the moment. And as of this moment, I just dropped, boom, a bonus thing you didn't know.
When it came time to cash in your chips, it's opened. A diseased maniac would be your banker.
Gene Hackman didn't do too badly for himself either. He scored a $2 million fee to play Lex Luthor, and his attachment to the film further solidified its legitimacy in the public's perception. But even after getting Brando and Hackman, there was still the problem of finding someone to play Superman. A lot of people don't know that Donner had to talk the producers out of going after a big star to play Superman. They'd originally wanted Robert Redford, Nick Nolte, or Paul Newman. Paul Newman, who, by the way, was 52 years old at the time. Newman turned down the Superman role and the Lex Luthor role, which they'd also offered to him before Hackman had signed on. Ultimately, the filmmakers agreed to go with an unknown in Christopher Reeve. And Reeve was a stroke of casting genius, but he almost didn't even get the part. The production team totally dismissed Reeve after meeting him in New York because they felt he looked too young and way too skinny. They went on to audition hundreds of other candidates, including Bruce Jenner, who had caught the producers' attention when competing in the 1976 Olympics. Jenner even did a screen test in Rome, but the producers agreed unanimously that Jenner simply didn't have the acting chops. Production was getting so desperate to find their Superman, they even screen tested the producer's wife's dentist at one point.
It's all over, Luthor. You're coming with me.
Weeks after blowing off Christopher Reeve, principal photography was looming, so they finally screen tested him and immediately realized, holy shit, this guy is totally your guy. But he was going to have to put on some LBs to pull off that bright blue bodysuit, which segues perfectly into our next thing.
How'd you like your first day on the job, huh?
Oh, well, frankly, the hours were sort of longer than I expected.
When Christopher Reeve signed on to play Superman, he was only 175, 180 pounds, so he was under strict orders from Richard Donner and the producers to put on some mass. What most people don't know is Darth Vader was Superman's personal trainer. David Prowse was the guy who played Darth Vader in the Star Wars films. You know, physically, inside the costume.
Find the passengers of this vessel. I want them alive!
But he was also the guy that the Superman production team hired to help Christopher Reeve get all swole. And Prowse definitely did the job. Under Prowse's guidance, Christopher Reeve put on some 20 pounds of muscle over the course of filming. And that was with no help from the Force, just weights and vitamins and shit.
Remember, there's a wire on your neck.
Yeah.
And don't touch those wires together, you'll be short-circuited and you go up in flames.
Superman's 1 and 2 were being shot at the same time in the late 70s. Now, this was a really, really big deal. You've got to remember, this is pre-Lord of the Rings, so the financial gamble of shooting 2 movies simultaneously of an unproven franchise was pretty ballsy. Problem was, production on Superman was a total cluster bang every step of the way. Richard Donner was constantly being told he was over budget and behind schedule, even though he was never given a budget or a schedule. Ultimately, production ran out of money, so the studio decided to go ahead and see what they had with the first film and table what they'd shot for Superman 2.
Bye, Frisky. Long now.
Long story short, Superman went on to be a huge hit. In fact, it was Warner Brothers' biggest movie ever at the time. But that didn't stop the producers from holding a grudge against Donner and bringing on another director to finish shooting Superman 2, in Richard Lester. Here's the part that most people don't know. Richard Donner had already shot somewhere between 60 and 70% of Superman 2. After all, they'd shot a good 19 months before the money ran out. In fact, they'd gotten so much done, Gene Hackman and Ned Beatty didn't shoot a single foot of film with Lester. So any scenes with them in Superman 2 were all under Donner's direction. Superman 3, on the other hand, is 100% Richard Lester, which says everything.
You always wanted to fly, Kent. Now's your chance.
Because Donner had done so much work on Superman 2, the producers felt somewhat obligated to ask if he wanted his name on the film after Lester finished it. Well, Donner got as far as this Eiffel Tower part, which is only 11 minutes into the film, and said no thanks. Quick bonus thing you may not have known, 10 years ago they finally strung together what would have been Donner's Superman 2 for a DVD release. The best they could anyway, filling in the blanks with screen tests and other footage that was never really meant to be in the final film.
No, don't be crazy now.
What?
They even got permission from Marlon Brando's estate to use his scenes as Jor-El, which weren't used in the original theatrical release because the producers didn't want to pay him for it. Still salty over that $3.7 million, I guess. Let's get into some Batman things. And this thing contains a spoiler, so if you still haven't gotten around to seeing Batman Returns, clearly you're just never going to. But I'm still going to be a good guy and tell you to skip ahead to the next thing.
I am Catwoman. Hear me roar.
Now that it's just us cool guys, let's talk about the ending with the reveal that Catwoman is still alive. You probably didn't know that keeping Catwoman alive was a last-minute decision from Tim Burton, which means the shot had to be created at the absolute last minute, and it wasn't cheap. They only had a few days to create the shot, and Michelle Pfeiffer wasn't available anymore, so that's actually not Michelle Pfeiffer we're seeing. First, they did a version where we see an animatronic Catwoman from behind looking at the bat signal, but that version wound up getting cut. Instead, they used a double for Catwoman, whom they shot on a blue screen and then composited her into the original negative. And by the effects team's own admission, the shot really doesn't make sense because there's nowhere for Catwoman to be standing in the shot. Then again, we are talking about a movie where a bunch of penguin pallbearers usher Danny DeVito into a watery grave, so why don't we all just let it go?
My dear penguin!
We stand on a great threshold.
Speaking of the penguins, you probably didn't know just how difficult it was to get them all for the film. Pretty much every working penguin in Hollywood at the time wound up getting booked on Batman Returns, including 30 Blackfoot penguins and 12 king penguins. They were hard to get because of their complex mating schedules. It took 3 days of blasting the AC to get the stages down to 30 degrees, both for the penguins and so it would be cold enough to see people's breath on film. But every time some jerk-off left the door open for 5 minutes, it would let all the cold air out because they were shooting Batman Returns in the summer. Anyway, they had to supplement the live penguins with animatronics, little people in costumes, and some early CG penguins just to have all of the flightless birds they needed for the film. But just so you know, the real penguins were super easy to work with. As long as you had treats when you were calling them and weren't interrupting their complex mating, they always hit their mark.
You're all doing a fine job.
Let's end this thing on a low note with Batman and Robin. And this thing actually helps to explain why the movie sucks so badly. Most people don't know that there was an actual directive from the studio to make Batman and Robin more kid-friendly and to make it more, this is an actual word they used, toy-etic. In other words, they wanted Joel Schumacher and the production team to find as many opportunities as possible within the film to create toys and merchandise. Which explains how we wound up with these suits, since they make no sense whatsoever within the movie. Or in general, really. There was even a toy company involved with the design of the Batmobile as it appears in the movie. They basically snatched the designs from the art department before the ink was even dry so they could send them off to China to have the toy molds made. After all, that mold making crap takes time. And it's more important to have your movie tie-in toys on the shelves at the same time the movie hits theaters than it is to try to make a halfway decent movie that actually makes sense and doesn't damage the franchise almost irreparably, right?
Chicks dig the car.
This is why Superman works alone.
Right. We're all on the same page. Guys, that is just the tip of the Fortress of Solitude. We have so many more things about the Batman and Superman movies, the old ones and the newer ones, so stay tuned for a part 2. In the meantime, you can check out our episode on the 1989 Batman and our episode on The Dark Knight. Thanks for watching our very special episode of Batman v Superman, Things You Didn't Know, and be sure to check out Cinefix.com and subscribe for more true-ish things about movies, and sometimes Darth Vader, the personal trainer, right here on Things You Didn't Know.
Bye.